How was covering the Bulls for ESPN?
Remember, I'd come out of football. I'd opened ESPN's bureau in Chicago. First game I did was Knicks Bulls game 5. And I'm sitting right courtside when, back then the introductions at old Chicago Stadium, the lights come down and no, you're Chicago Bulls. And I remember having that feeling of like, oh my God, this is kind of really cool, but I'm a journalist and I have to be, but it was just this kind of surreal moment. And that was getting thrown into the fire, man, because the Pistons won my first 2 years. Then the Bulls started their run of 6. And I remember I was in the Pistons locker room early on. And believe it or not, Dennis Rodman came over to me and he said, now, look, again, I'm carrying an ESPN mic flag. So automatically that's going to give me a degree of credibility.
Sure.
I had made sure to introduce myself to everybody, to Chuck Daly, to the players, all that sort of stuff. And Robin comes over to me and goes, are you getting treated okay? Is everything all right? And I'm like, yes. And he goes, if anybody bothers you, you come to me. And I'm like, oh my God, okay. So I kind of had my protector in the locker room, and I had an issue with Zeke, with Isaiah Thomas at some point. That was when it was after they won the championship. I don't know if you remember, and there was, I think, some gambling allegations that came out, and I had to ask him about it. But that sends me over to the Bulls. Okay. So probably the biggest story I ever broke in my career was Jordan coming back to basketball. In fact, hold on. This still sits on my desk. This is a note that arrived with a bottle of champagne to my hotel room in Chicago. And it says, if you could have only one reporter for print or television to get a story, it would have to be Andrea Kremer. And it's signed Vince Doria, who was our managing editor at the time. So I broke that story. And then I went on to do Mike Jordan's first interview when he came back. And I remember that there was a column written in the San Francisco Chronicle, and the writer said, Michael Jordan's first interview, Ed Bradley, Dan Rather, Barbara Walters, Diane Sawyer, they all tried to get him, but who got him? Andrea Kremer from ESPN. And that's because I was there every friggin' day. When he came back from Atlantic City after gambling during the playoffs, I was in the media scrum. When he went and played for the White Sox in Nowheresville, America, I was there. When he went down to North Carolina and had to testify in the Slim Buller trial because he was a bail bondsman and they found a check from Michael Jordan in his possession, I was there. I was there. I reported on these things and I was there. And Jordan trusted me. And that was one of by far the biggest interviews of my career. So it was, I worked so hard to build a relationship with him, with Phil Jackson. One more quick story or no? Do we have time?
Of course. Yeah.
You remember the infamous Scottie Pippen would not go in at the end of the game.
Yep.
And Phil had diagrammed the winning shot for Tony Kukoc. So my cameraman was right there on the side of the Bulls bench and saw everything went down. So game ends. We're going down the rickety stairs in Chicago Stadium to get into the locker room. And my cameraman tells us what happened. So we actually knew everything that happened beforehand. And we could, really get a jump on all the questions. Well, the next day, I had been scheduled to sit down with Phil for a Sunday conversation, which at that time on SportsCenter was huge. It was all the big gets. They gave you a ton of time to do it. And I'd scheduled this weeks in advance. So I'm like flipping out. This is the biggest story in sports. Okay. A star player refusing to go in the game. And I'm supposed to sit down with the head coach. So my producers, everybody's saying, what should we do? I go, we're going to just go. We're just going to go and we're going to kind of pretend that, nothing's going to stop us. We're going to show up. We're going to set up. So We get to the Birdo Center really early the next day, and we're loading in, and I'm walking 'cause we're on the second floor, and, where we're shooting, and the, guys are coming up in the elevator, and I'm walking up the stairs, and, Phil's walking down the stairs, and on the landing is Jerry Krause, the Bulls general manager, and he sees me and he snarls, "What's she doing here?" And Phil goes, "I committed to an interview with her and I'm doing it." And inside I'm going, "Yay, yay, yay, yay," because we got the only interview with Phil Jackson. I mean, you know, there were satellite trucks down the street. Every news organization in the country is that and we got the interview with Phil. And I respected him so much for that because he gave me his word on something and he lived up to it. He didn't know that this was going to blow up. So, you know, it was, I loved covering the NBA back then. I
Yep.
love covering the NBA back then. And I did all of Jordan's championships and had a great relationship with Phil going into the Lakers, did a huge, big interviews with him when he was there. And then, uh, so I had Phil at all these places. And then I ended up being the first journalist to go to see him in Montana. I profiled him for Real Sports. And there's this one great scene where we're standing, right by his, on the lakefront of his property. And I say something like, you know, you don't really have anybody coming out here, any outsiders coming out here. And he goes, no, and you're too close already. And it was just this like great Phil moment. But, I think that speaks to the value of relationships and trust that you build up over years and years and years.